That's what we like, a rowdy crowd. So what's your...
Just leave it word in the middle between them.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for coming. So, this is everyone. Art will introduce who everyone is to the audience.
Well, maybe they could each introduce themselves and their role in Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things.
I'm Seth Sklarey. I played Orville. I'm Bruce Solomon, and I played Winds.
I'm Carl Zittrer, and I did the music.
I'm Alan Ormsby. I played Alan.
I'm Anya Ormsby. I played Anya.
I'll let Art do the first question.
This is so exciting. I host a lot of these, but I'm I'm overwhelmed with how excited I am. This is quite the assemblage. So, Alan, you were kind of, when you and Bob Clark met in college, you were the horror guy. You were the guy who was more into horror. Is that correct?
Oh, well, when I was a kid, I was into it, yeah. I mean, I wasn't into it at the time we met, actually. I was more into serious. I was trying to be an actor and, you know. So, I mean, I liked horror, but I wasn't, when I was a kid, I was really a fan of Hammer films and, you know, the old Universal pictures and all that stuff.
Well, and how did the idea originally come about to begin working on this project?
Well, I knew Bob in school, but then I went away to college. When I came back about 5 years later, I ran into him on the street, and he said that he'd gotten some money together to make a movie, and he wanted to make a horror film, but he wasn't sure. I guess I did know about horror movies, so he asked me my advice or something. And I told him that there was a movie playing called Night of the Living Dead. I hadn't seen it, but I certainly heard about it. It was, you know, it really had a reputation as being frightening. I said, well, why don't we go see that? So we went to see it. I don't know, were you with us, Carl? You were, okay. And was Gary too, maybe?
Maybe.
Okay.
I don't remember.
Anyway, it was playing at a theater in downtown Miami, and it was a scary movie, as you all know, I'm sure. And we came out, and basically it was, oh, well, let's do something like that. We basically ripped it off. But we changed it too, you know. We kind of, you know, we added this whole troupe of actors and all that kind of stuff. And Bob came up with this title, which I still think is a great title. And he said, well, I have to write it in 10 days, so I have to write 10 pages a day. And he would sit in his, I guess, girlfriend's apartment down in South Miami. And he wrote on yellow legal pads with pencil. And he wrote, not in cursive, but in block letters, you know. And at some point he said, I can't finish it all, I have too much to do, will you write some of it? So I think he said, will you write this part, that part, that part? So I did that, and I think the stuff I wrote is more towards the end of the movie. I think I wrote the speeches when I'm reading from the book and all that kind of stuff, and I wrote a lot of the stuff in the house, I remember. Anyway, we had a script put together, and I don't know how I don't know if I volunteered to do this makeup or he asked me or something, I don't know. So I thought that would be kind of fun. And the makeup was all toilet paper and latex and mortician's wax and stuff like that. And I had a thing called the visible head, which was a plastic life-size head with a skull and it had a brain and all this, and eyeballs. So I used that. I used the eyeball in Bruce's mask that he wore, and the teeth, I think, came out of this skull, this plastic skull. And then it was, I took a cast of Bruce's head, and I was just reminding him that I did it wrong, and I had the plaster came over his ear, so when I was trying to take it off, I couldn't get it off of his head. And I said to Gary, I think Bruce is going to lose his ears. I just was actually screwing around with Gary. but I wanted to freak him out because he had pissed me off about something. And he was calling Bob and calling the hospital, and we're going to have to amputate Bruce's ears. And, anyway, we finally got it off of Bruce's head, and I made a positive cast of his head, and I built the mask on that out of, again, toilet paper. I think I used crushed eggshells in the head, just anything that was in my mother's kitchen, because that's where I built it. And anyway, then we gathered up a bunch of zombies, which were hippies, basically, kind of lounging in, Coconut Grove, yeah. And they were just out in the park, and it was kind of like, hey, you guys want to be in a movie? And, oh, yeah, sure, So we gathered up these people and took them to an island where they couldn't escape, and made them up, and it was pretty funny, actually, because at some point, they rebelled against the conditions. Do you remember this? And they were like demonstrating. They weren't going to work because they were getting day-old meatball sandwiches from this place called the Mad Italian, I remember. And they were stuck on this island. Oh, they were pissed. Because they had to wait for hours in this makeup, and they couldn't take it off. And I remember at one point, Bob and there was a pier that went out into the water, kind of a long pier, and it was sort of shaky. And there were sharks swimming around in the water. So Bob, or the cameraman, I think the DP, wanted to check something, and he walked out to the end of this dock, and every step the dock kind of swayed, And then he said, Bob, come and take a look at this. So then Bob came out, and these guys were both sort of heavy set. So then Bob comes out, and the thing is rocking, And then Bob signaled, I think, to Gary. So Gary was about 5 feet tall and about 300 pounds. And so he starts out, and he gets about halfway out, and I remember Bob said, no, Gary, don't. And the whole thing collapsed. They went into the water, and these sharks are swimming around, So anyway, we fished them out, and we shot all this stuff on the island. They built a cemetery there, I think a pretty good one, and we shot a lot of stuff there. I think did they shoot the scene with the zombies coming out? Was that on the island, or was that in the...
I think it was both, in front of the house
Oh,
and
okay.
on the island.
But when they came out of the ground.
I think that was the island.
Okay, yeah. But then we shot other stuff in the nursery. What the
Botanical Garden.
Matheson Hammock?
It was the county nursery where they grew the plants for the county for the roads and things. But they're full of mosquitoes. Both places were totally infested with mosquitoes.
is what?
Both of the locations were totally infested with mosquitoes.
Yes, they were.
I used to get into the coffin and just close the lid because it was the only way I could escape from the mosquitoes. And then the coffin was in the grave, so some wise guys started to shovel some dirt on top of the coffin. And, I finally realized what was going on, and I was pissed. And I flipped open that coffin, and I roared out of this grave, and they knew it was me, but they were scared shitless.
I have a question. I don't know if it's a question, but so a lot of there are quite a few films from that time period that films made during that time period. Well, not quite a few, but some that are so creepy. Even back then they were creepy. I mean, does anybody disagree this movie was not creepy? And even today, it's like with all the films that have been made and all the advances into technology and stuff and all the attempts to make movies like that, and it still doesn't succeed. This movie just still is creepy. And Art, would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
And so I guess it's a general throw out somebody here question. Why do you think it just came out that way? I know you had a script and a plan to make a film about this subject matter, but it just came out so unusual for the budget and everything. It just worked that this is a creepy film even today.
One of the things was a lot of things were understated. The makeup was excellent. The special effects were excellent. The music was excellent. The script was absolutely horrible, but But it was kind of understated. But they did some things that had never been done before. For example, when the zombies were eating the people, they actually got liver and things like that they were eating raw liver, and so it was real looking. And when I attacked Alan, of course, there was no blood, there was no anything. It was just kind of understated, but it was the ultimate revenge.
Well, we hear so much about Vietnam-era horror movies, and so many of them had such a dark, serious tone. And then here you have this movie that has a very comedic tone, and it's very dialogue-heavy, very loud costumes. This movie comes out in the same time period as movies like I Drink Your Blood and Last House on the Left, which were very in your face. So why the choice to be so tongue-in-cheek with the material?
Who are you asking? You asking me?
Sure.
Oh. I don't know. I think it's just the way the script came out. I think that probably part of it is that we didn't have enough money to make it a solid zombie action movie from the beginning, like Night of the Living Dead or one of those pictures, or Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So I think we had to really do some filler for the first, say, half of the movie. I mean, there was the thing with the gag they were playing, and they had the guy buried and all that stuff. But the action didn't really start until, I think, like an hour into the film. And for me, that's when it takes off. I mean, it's hard for me to watch because my pants and all of that stuff, you know. Yeah, I know.
The bright yellow shirt is beautiful.
Yeah, the bright yellow shirt and the pants. I have had more comments on those pants over the years. It's really incredible. Yes.
I think too that you write what you know, and since we didn't have unlimited resources, I think Alan and Bob, everybody was in an acting troupe. Everybody was acting, or just finished some play, and so everybody knew this group of people, whatever their version was of these, this cast of characters. So I think it was a very natural place to go, and it was also very natural to fall into. I unfortunately had, 3 lines in the entire movie, so I had to actually be the person. So that was my challenge. But no, you write what you know.
If I may, I think there's another reason that we're missing, in that most movies hire actors, and the actors come from wherever they come, and they don't know each other until they meet on the set. But all these people, Anya, Alan, Bob, myself, Bruce, knew each other and were in theater, in other venues, and so we came to it with a sense of fun. And I think that's what sews the movie together.
Yeah, I believe that's true. It does have a lot to do with the fact that we were all very close friends. If not close friends, we were close friends with friends. It was a fun time. It was exciting, and none of us had really been that far into movie making before, so it was especially exciting, and that helped quell the mosquito situation.
Also, some of us were related. I mean, Anya and I were married at the time, and her brother was in the movie. He was Paul. And Val and I had been a couple several years before this happened. And we'd all
Very
acted
inbred.
And my first wife was in the movie.
Yep.
So, yes, it was an incestuous group, actually.
Yeah, really. It's kind of unhealthy now that I think about it.
Family affair, sort of. Art?
A question based on a conversation we just had prior to this panel. Was Ted V. Michaels on the set at all? I know that you ended up scoring a movie for him right after that. He claims to have been on the set.
He was. He was on the set. And I remember one of the things he tried to do he wanted the lights turned down. And Bob was afraid of turning the lights down. Bob and the cameraman were afraid of turning the lights down because I don't want to lose it. I remember the camera guy saying, I don't want to lose it, meaning he didn't want to film it so dark that the image failed to take. And Michaels, who was a veteran of many, I don't know if any of you know who TV Michaels, TV for Ted Victor, but because it was TV, he wasn't embarrassed to take advantage of that. He said, no, it's too light, it's too bright, and made everybody turn the lights down. And I think we owe him, he's no longer with us, but we should thank him for that.
So was Ted just kind of supervising a little bit? Like,
No, he was the first, he was the distributor, he was supervising is a rather formal word for what went on. It was more, he was suggesting.
Was it fun years later paying tribute to Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things in Porky's 2? I know that you wrote Porky's 2, and that scene obviously has a major Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things influence.
And can somebody describe that scene so you know what we're talking about?
Could you describe that scene?
I don't remember the scene.
I'm not sure
Well,
what.
there's a scene in Porky's 2 where they play a prank involving a zombie.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I think it did come out of that, yes.
did you do the makeup for that zombie? Because it looks like
No, I wasn't, they wouldn't have allowed me to do it then. You'd have to have a makeup guy to, you know.
it looks just like.
You all, or many of you, went on to participate in Dead of Night, and we definitely have Dead of Night fans. I mean, you all, or many of you have went on to lots of projects we could discuss. But did it feel different moving on to a bigger project like Dead of Night?
Did it feel different?
Did it feel like? Did you feel pressure that you needed the next movie to be bigger in scope?
I think what happened was a Canadian company saw children
Yes.
and asked if we had something else. And I had this idea for a script, so I wrote it very quickly in about 2 weeks or something. And we showed it to them, and they liked it, and they agreed to finance it. So it sort of came out of children, but it wasn't, I don't know that we were, that's what I remember.
I remember not so much that the difference between the two movies was that Dead of Night, as it was called at that time, was much more organized. It was much more regular in this, so in that way it was more movie-like.
It had a bigger budget too.
Yeah, it had a much bigger. I don't know what the budget was.
It's $250.
It's okay, which would be a nothing budget today, but it was much more organized, and it had John Marley, who was an eminent actor at the time, and
Lynn Carlin.
Carlin. I can't remember who else. Richard Backus. So it was, and the people, the characters, at least at the beginning of the movie, started out, a bit more normal. Because the characters and children, even from the first frame, weren't, no offense, but weren't entirely normal. But in Dead of Night, it had the first impression was that everybody was normal.
And that was the point.
Yes,
It was
exactly.
Middle America sends their children to war, basically.
It also had to look like a sort of Ozzie and Harriet family,
Exactly.
that were going to get visited by this horrible thing.
I remember also when I was saying that it was more movie-like professionally, that Henderson Forsyth was in this, and he was the guy that people would come up to, like people in the town would come up to him and want photographs and his autograph. They didn't care much. Marley too, but more Henderson Forsyth. And,
he was on TV.
and this kind of annoyed Marley.
I'd like to ask Alan about Deranged
Yes.
and how the script for that came about.
How did it come about? Let's see. I went to some convention because I would go to these conventions and promote children. And I met this guy, Tom Carr, at one of these conventions. I can't remember which one. And I guess he had seen children and he wanted to make a movie about Ed Gein. And so he wanted us to do it. So I said, well, I put him in touch with Bob, and we met in Miami, I think. And he had the money. He had been a concert promoter or something, right?
Yes. Yeah,
And I think this is the only movie he ever did. So he wanted to do this movie, and I went and did the research. And at the time, I didn't really know a whole lot about Ed Gein, and I did this research, and it was like horrifying, really, truly awful. And I thought, oh my God, I don't know how we're going to do this. And so I wanted to make it kind of a black comedy. And Tom wasn't crazy about that idea, but he went along with it anyway. And he still to this day doesn't like any of the comedic aspects of it. But I wrote a script, and then I worked with Jeff because we were going to co-direct it and kind of, pared it down or whatever, tweaked it here and there, I don't know. And I think we got a couple of notes from Tom Carr, which we incorporated. And then he put up the money, and we went to Canada and shot it there. But I'm trying to think, we did Death Dream first, right? Yeah.
Yes.
I think we were working on Death Dream and working on Deranged kind of at the same time.
But you directed Great Masquerade before those two, right?
Oh, what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
So there was a lot all happening in a relatively quick period of time after Children's Film.
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
And I mean, to make Death Dream and Deranged in that short period of time too. I mean, these are classic films. What if any challenges did co-directing a movie pose? Did you work well together?
We worked fine together. Jeff was a great guy, and there was no ego battle or anything like that. I mean, I had certain ideas about certain scenes, and he had other ideas about other scenes, and we got along just fine. It was not a problem at all.
I just wanted to interject, for those of you who don't know who Ed Gein was a fellow who had a mother, and his mother had died, and he kept his mother at home after she died, and he would rob graves of young women and take their facial parts and their body parts and kind of paste them onto his mother to make his mother look better. Of course, it was the basis for the movie Psycho, and it was the basis for the movie Deranged, and I think there was one other movie might have been made out of it. But
Texas Chainsaw Massacre was based on it too. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
yes, so it's kind of have an iconic view of American history.
Art?
Alan Ormsby, you went on to write many great films, including Cat People, and but the teen movie My Bodyguard, which many of us, depending on what year you got HBO, watched over and over and over again. Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Well, let's see. After Deranged, I didn't want to work in movies anymore, and I went into the toy business, and I made some money there, and we were going to move to LA, and I was going to write a script that I was thinking I would try to sell to Clint Eastwood, and it was called The Bodyguard, and it was about this bodyguard, and then I read in Variety one day that Larry Kasdan had written a script called The Bodyguard. So I thought, oh shit, no, I can't write that. So I put it aside, and we moved to LA, and I'm trying to remember. I don't know. Somehow I decided I would make it about kids. You know.
Some did. Some did.
But,
That's
yeah,
just history.
and well, I think Art brought it up because it wound up being like that movie that was always on eventually HBO, and it was originally in a theater, and it was always the movie where I think it's hard to translate. Like, if you were the little guy picked upon, and then there's an outsider guy, and the outsider guy is the guy that's going to protect you, and actually you're going to want to be the outsider too. You know, I think that's how we picked up on that. Some people.
Well, it was the first movie about bullying, I think, and that became a huge issue in our society. So I think, you know, that had always been an issue for any kid I ever knew who went to school. I mean, you were always, if you weren't being bullied, you were worried about being bullied. And it's a huge deal now, you know, that. So I think that struck a nerve.
And Carl, you continued your relationship with Bob Clark through the Porky's movies, A Christmas Story. You also wrote the scores for a lot of other Canadian tax shelter era movies like Prom Night and Curtains, and you went on to write scores for big movies like Moonstruck and New Jack City. You've had a
No, I didn't write those.
You did not write those.
Supervised them.
You supervised those. Well, you've been involved in the scores
Yes,
for some very, very, very big films. What was it like transitioning from scoring for lower budget movies to some major movies?
Well, as I say, New Jack City, I didn't write it. I supervised it through several composers that got hired and then subsequently fired. And Moonstruck was an entirely different experience. I did design it. I guess you could say I designed Moonstruck by taking the opera that is the basis of the film and finding instrumental versions of the opera and editing them so that the movie had a score, even though it wasn't a legal score. It was a template for Dick Hyman, who was the actual composer, and he admitted to me that he was very grateful for what I had done. And when you design a score with pre-existing music, there's not a lot of jeopardy to it. In other words, if you record music for a movie and it doesn't work or the director doesn't like it, you've suddenly spent a great deal of money that you can't get back, and people frown at you when you do that. But when you're finding music that already pre-exists, it's an experiment that doesn't really have a much jeopardy to it. And so I enjoyed doing it. I compare it with playing jazz. Let's try this, let's try that. Let's get reactions from people. And the reactions I liked, I retained, and the ones I didn't like, I dismissed as, well, they don't know what they're talking about. The difference between the movies of this size of Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things and even Death Dream, compared with New Jack City, is that with the bigger movies, you have a staff of people that do things for you and that will answer questions and find things. And with the small movie, I was, in a sense, the composer and the driver at the same time. So it's like any other industry. If you own a small hardware store, it's different from running Home Depot. I hope that answers the question, or at least sounds like it does.
And
Alan, could you describe how do you play children? When in an interview, did you describe an Oscar Wilde type?
Oscar Wilde. I think Oscar Wilde was nicer. Well, You know, it's funny. I don't think I thought of this at the time, but people keep asking me, was it based on Charles Manson? And now I look at it and I think it must have had some influence on us, because I have that beard kind of like him, and it's this kind of weird cult-like group, and maybe there was some unconscious or semi-conscious thing about that. But I kept thinking of Vincent Price. I thought, I got to be like Vincent Price, and so I was doing all that stuff, you know, and I didn't really know how to be in front of a camera. But anyway, it was fun. I look at it now and I kind of, oh well, you know. But I just thought he was a mean guy, a villain, a bad guy. That was the extent of the subtlety with which I approached that character. And I had all this dialogue I had to remember. You know, I had a lot of speeches. And that was, half the time I was thinking, I have to get this speech out, and I have to hit this mark, and I have to turn my head like this. And, you know, I didn't know how to do that stuff. And I don't know if any of you ever been in a movie, but you have. Well, then you know what I'm talking about. You know, you have to, it's very technical. You know, when I watch people now like Spencer Tracy or somebody like that, I can see them hitting their marks kind of, you know, they just do it so smoothly. If you weren't looking for it, you would never notice it in a million years, you know. So I think it takes a lot of practice.
And occasionally you can even see the marks, you know, but you're not looking at the marks because you're looking at Spencer Tracy. But if you look down, you can every once in a while see the masking tape. That's where he had to put his foot.
I also wanted to point out that Bruce Solomon is a familiar face from a lot of early 1980s, late 70s TV, and including Mary Hartman. It's funny, in doing preparation research for this, it's like, oh my God, you appeared in all these things. That's where I seen you from, because growing up, I was like, you were in that, you were in this. And Mary Hartman today is remembered as a very quirky TV show.
Sort of a classic.
Yeah, but it was different, you know, and probably why it's remembered so fondly. I think we're gonna probably wrap this up because you guys have your room to get back to. And thank you all for coming to see the casting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
What you